Welcome, everyone, to episode 5 of Breakthroughs with Bre. On this podcast, we are having breakthroughs about our self growth, our self healing, and our spiritual awakening journeys, all in pursuit of living our most authentic, free, and joyous lives. My name is Bre. I'm an Akashic Records channeler, astrologer, energy healer, and psychic. And today we are having breakthroughs on the Akashic Records. If you have just heard this name and feel curious about it, this podcast is for you. If you kind of have an idea of what they are, but you really want to know more, perfect podcast. If you're curious about working with the records, whether yourself or through a guide, this episode is going to help you out. So stay tuned. Remember, we have the whole podcast time-stamped in the description. It's hyperlinked, so you can click to whatever section resonates most with you. Let's get started. Today, I have someone very special on the podcast, an Akashic Records reader, teacher, and coach who happens to be the person who taught me about channeling the Akashic Records. Welcome, Anne-Marie Pizarro.
Yay, I'm so happy to be here. Really excited.
And we are honestly getting a treat. She is taking a little bit of a break for her birthday and just like a good practice, break from being fully available for client work. So the fact that we get to have her space and her mind and her spirit with us today is something I really cherish. So thank you so much for coming.
What a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here, Bre, and especially to support you and the work you're doing as a reader and a podcaster in the world. So
Yeah.
exciting.
I really felt like once I started working with the records more, not only has it profoundly changed me as a person, but I felt like I was getting so much more information to guidance and wisdom and these things that wanted to come through. And, Instagram and TikTok, it's fun for like little short blurbs, which are important, but there definitely felt like there needed to be more of a long form to go into depth
Oh,
about
yeah.
some of these things. So the podcast was born from that because the Akashic
Love it.
Records keepers, like now they give me assignments. I'm like doing readings and they're like, do a podcast on this and I'll make a note. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So
Right. It helps guide, in a way what to talk about.
absolutely.
Love that.
Absolutely. So I will turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Bre. Well, I didn't exactly start off in the world of channeling and reading. I actually started off in a very traditional conservative field, which was nursing. And when I graduated from nursing in 1998, that was when a part of me immediately in the first year said to myself, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I found myself 10 years later going, oh my God, I'm still doing this. I can't believe I'm still doing this. But at that time, that was when I had already started learning how to read the Akashic Records. I had started launching my business. And so from 2009 until about 2016, I really just focused on growing my Akashic Records business. And that was essentially doing readings for clients and growing my confidence and my abilities as a business owner, as a spiritual entrepreneur. And starting around 2014, I started getting this message from the record keepers, which was, we need you to get ready. We need you to get ready. And I didn't quite understand what they were talking about. At this point in time, I'd already worked through avian flu, SARS, COVID-1, West Nile virus, all these other potential triggers. And I could see the writing on the wall. I knew something was going to be coming. I could feel that. And so in 2014 to 2016, that is when my business really exploded. And I think the reason why is I committed. I 100% committed and told the record keepers, okay, guys, I'm going to give you a year and I want you to show me what you can do for me. And I will follow every single thing that you offer in order to align to my path. And before 2016 was even done, I turned in my resignation. I asked for a miracle from the record keepers. They gave me 3 miracles within a span of 2 hours of my day starting. And that's when I realized if you ask and they deliver, you've got to follow, or else you're actually standing in your way. And so I turned in my resignation the same day I asked for the miracles. And it kicked off a very busy work life from that point on. And in 2016 and 2017, I started to get this message consistently in every session I was doing with clients, which was, there's just not enough. There's not enough healers, readers, channels, guides, coaches to really help the world and all the problems, and something big is about to happen. And for years, I kept agreeing and I kept agreeing and I kept agreeing until finally the record keeper said to me in one session one day, "This is also for you, Anne. You just don't want to hear it." So I was like, oh, dang it. They called me out. So when they call me out, I humbly go in and go, okay, what am I not listening to? What am I not paying attention to? And their words were, we wouldn't be repeating that there's not enough healers or readers if you weren't supposed to do something about it. I was like, oh, me? Little old me, what do you want me to do about it? And they said, we want you to teach. So starting in 2018, I started teaching just individual workshops. And at that time, I was still in that schism of being afraid that I might have to go back to my old work as a nurse versus really trusting that this was now my new career. And it took one sold out one-day workshop in Los Angeles. I was just doing Akashic Records level 1. It was just a simple training. And 90% of the people that attended this workshop were all my clients. And they wanted to come and learn to read the Akashic Records. And so that workshop in that one day, I made more than I ever did in a whole year working as a nurse. In one day, I was like, what? You're kidding me. They were like, we've been telling you for years, you just want to take the harder path. You want to take the path. So I asked them, okay, well, show me what the next step is. The next step was to start teaching how to become an Akashic Records guide. And that pivoted from a weekend workshop into a 12-week program, which then I improved into an 8-week program. And it launched in end of 2019. It was primed for COVID, because when COVID happened, I now had this program ready to teach. There were people all over the world whose lives were shut down and they were feeling really isolated. And we created this community that was really supportive. And I trained quite a number of readers who launched their practice and are now working as Akashic Record readers and healers. And that's when I realized this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's so much fun. And it honestly doesn't feel like work. It feels really like play. And when I work alongside the record keepers, they give me such phenomenal information and guidance around what to create that it helps me as a person and as a reader and a teacher just relax and know I just have to go with the flow rather than always be in that cycle of thinking and fearfulness around, how am I going to do this? I honestly feel like I've been taken care of since I agreed to do this work. I don't know if you feel the
So
same.
beautiful. Yes. Yeah, I since transitioning into doing it full time, my life is absolutely changing. I'm changing. And I feel like I'm kind of even in the middle of feeling a really big change. But I absolutely have felt the presence of my own guides and spirit and of the keepers around me. When people ask me too how it felt when I put in my notice for my full-time job a few months ago, I'm like, I felt such a weight lifted off my shoulders. It felt like I'd almost stepped through a time portal. Like I had already put in notice like months ago, like as
Yeah.
soon as it happened. And
Yeah.
it felt like I was already ready. Like I had been ready for quite some time,
Yeah.
and it felt like such a relief. And of course, there's been that my own things to work through fears or whatever, but that has not changed. That I felt a lot of peace and
Yeah.
this real confidence that this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And it was really just in, again, like you said, honoring the messages, honoring the knowing that was coming through and trusting it.
Right. Well, one of the things I want to share with you is that in the training program, the record keepers often talk about our assigned group. In the world of marketing, you might hear this phrase, niche, target market, ideal client avatar. Those are great words, but for readers and channels, they don't think of the people that they're serving the same. When I discovered, and when the record keepers shared with me that you have an assigned group that you're here to serve, it completely made everything make sense. And it calmed down that worry part in the back of our heads around, how am I going to do this? When they said you're assigned a group, then I realized I just have to relax and really focus on attracting, talking, connecting to that group, which personalizes that connection so much more than that word niche or target market. So the fact that you shared that you had the confidence to put your resignation in is your higher self literally telling you, we got you covered, Bre. We just need your third dimensional self to get past that push and pull of can we do it versus are we gonna have to struggle to take that leap of faith, because this is what we actually agreed to do on earth, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. And
Right.
that's just so there's so much truth to that. And you shared that with me in an Akashic Records reading I did with you about having an assigned like
What?
group to work with.
Yeah.
Yes, it came up in a session and that also created a lot of peace in me. And what I'm experiencing now, and in the work that I've experienced even just the last few weeks, is that this mantra has come up of exactly who is meant to meet me with the frequency that I'm at right now and with the knowledge that I have is who is present. And
Love it.
as I evolve and my frequency shifts and I grow, the people who are meant for me at that exact moment are going to show up, right? And that's going to continue. So I
Wow.
don't have to worry about when are they coming, how are they coming, whatever. And I also don't have to worry about the imposter syndrome. Am I good enough for the people here? Am I doing enough? They're like, no, exactly where you're at. And the people who are with you are who are meant to receive you as you are. So like
Yes.
keep
Love it.
attending to yourself, keep attending to your spiritual growth, keep attending to, the messages and activations and all of these things that we're bringing through. And as you grow and change, the people who are meant for you at each stage of that are going to be around and they're going to find you because again, the group's already, it's assigned, it's set.
Exactly. It's already assigned. They're not saying it in a present tense. You have an assigned group. You have assigned, like it's in past tense, as in these are the group of people that you agreed to before you even came down to this planet. So I agree with you around the whole imposter syndrome thing, because I think that when people suffer from imposter syndrome, it's because they're not really sure who they're really supposed to be working with. And so it causes them to get triggered around their good enoughs. But when you know these are the people that are whose frequency, whose energies, whose soul agreements and contracts are supposed to connect to me and are aligned to me, you literally relax and step into the place of just receiving them, right?
Absolutely.
Love this conversation with you
Oh,
already. I'm
I
already
love
relaxed.
it. I love it. Okay, I do have some of those questions. I don't know if you have your answers pulled up, but my audience loves to hear those about the guests. Can you tell us a little bit about like your sun, moon, and rising and all of that fun stuff if you have it?
Yeah, well, that's so fascinating that you ask about that. I literally just got as a gift from myself, like a very in-depth astrological report that was also an Ayurvedic Vedic astrology report. So when I got to see it, I was like, oh wow. So my sun is in Gemini and my rising is also in Gemini.
Ooh.
That's real fun.
Do you have
And
your moon sign too?
my moon is in Virgo. So I'm glad
Mm,
that Virgo moon that helps to balance both the sun in Gemini and the rising in Gemini. The only thing I'm really flaky about is where are we going to eat? That's like the flakiest thing I am about. But when it comes to like executing business decisions, that Virgo moon is really clear, and having that sun in Gemini helps me to just take actions quickly.
mm. I love that. That's a very Mercury driven chart. There's a lot of like intellectual logic, analytic faculties available with so much Mercury, even just in your big three.
Yeah. And so I really try to work when Mercury is in retrograde. I really try to work with that energy, especially recognizing the patterns
Mm.
that I have around those retrograde seasons, because I've seen them, and I've seen them and recognized them enough to know now when it starts to happen and I start to see myself going into these patterns, I pull myself back and go, you sign up for programs or you buy this thing or you initiate this thing during retrograde because somehow you feel like you're going to be able to carry it off. You never carry it off. So now I'm just like, just chill with it. Yeah.
That's so funny. Uh, well, thank you for sharing that. Do you of that list, do you have any of those other ones in terms of have you done the human design or the Myers-Briggs, or tell us about any of that you have?
With the human design, I'm a 5-2 manifestor generator. Um, I find that when I had my human design read for me, and I had been studying the gene keys prior to doing human design. I was actually even teaching classes on channeling the gene keys, different genes. So when I got my human design, it was really fascinating, because one of the things that appears within my design and my house, my astrological houses, and I'm sure I'm not the only human being that does this, is I tend to replay past scenarios in my mind. So I'll replay these past scenarios and I'll create all these potential ways it could have turned out differently. And when I had my human design reading, this person said to me, "This is a complete waste of your time. It doesn't do any good for you, and how you actually respond to the scenario in the moment is exactly how you were supposed to respond to it in the moment." So thinking about this experience from the past and replaying all these different scenes completely wastes your energy. And the moment they said that, I was like, oh, totally done. Got it. And it was like something in me switched it off and said, how we experience the moment is exactly how we experience the moment. And since that time, when things occur in my life and I end up catching myself and I'll replay back and I go, oh, you could have done this differently. You could have done this differently. You could have done this differently. I make a note to myself that says, be more present next time something appears, so you don't have any regrets on how you could have done it. And so that's been the great value of the human design. The whole sacral authority, split definition, there's still so much of that that's a little bit murky for me, but I really try to work with the manifestor generator, the 5-2. One of the things that I discovered recently is that my particular motivation is coming from innocence. I don't have an agenda. So when I create, it's just that spirit goes, here you go. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. As opposed to, here you go. And then I go into, well, I'm going to try to have all these different kind of people with incomes like this and blah, blah, blah. That part just doesn't even enter my mind. It's more of a, let's see what happens. In terms of Myers-Briggs, I did this recently, and I believe I'm an INFJ. And when I did the test, it showed up as an advocate. So that was the role that I got from there. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that did. And what's fun and what's wonderful too is I just very recently did human design. I have not even looked into it at all. I'm a manifesting generator. I'm a 4-6, but
Okay.
I think I also am a sacral generator. I think that was the primary one.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of fun stuff to learn there. I think because I work so closely with astrology and there's just so much like
Yeah.
robust and detail there. I almost
Yeah.
kind of sometimes find that like like I have my plate full with even just that. But
Totally.
I love these different systems, and really that's all these like fun little questions are. They're like ways to understand ourselves better and work with our own, uniqueness and our own patterns and our own impulses in a way that's more conscious, that's more
Yeah,
aware.
totally.
So at some point I probably will invest either in like a full reading, or I myself, I love to like get books and listen to podcasts and learn
Right.
myself. I'm a Virgo sun, so I also love like the research and like diving into all the energy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And okay, are you a Harry Potter fan? Do you know your Hogwarts house?
Love Harry Potter. I got into Harry Potter when the first books came out. My old college roommate actually reached out to me. She was like, have you heard of Harry Potter? And so I remember reading it and I got really addicted to it. And then my daughter, we were reading Harry Potter when she was still little. Well, I think in terms of Harry Potter houses, I honestly feel like I'm in Slytherin. I don't think they're all bad guys.
Tell me why you feel like Slytherin resonates with you. I would love to know.
Well, I love Gryffindor house, and I think the Gryffindors are a little bit on the goody two-shoe side. I think there's a part of my nature that is a little irreverent about things, and I'd like to say energetically and spiritually, I like to walk the edge. But I'm definitely always on the side of light. So perhaps that's why I'm in the Slytherin house, because I'm bringing some of the energy, that light, into this otherwise kind of a kooky, dark place.
A little bit of a rebel, you know?
A little bit of a rebel. I think you got to be a little bit of a soul rebel if you're going to be an Akashic Records reader.
100%. Yeah, I'd be so curious to look at your chart too, because I wonder if you have a little bit of Aquarius in your chart. I don't know if you remember there being like an element of that.
What's in Aquarius for me is Jupiter.
Mm.
Jupiter is an Aquarius for me. And so I find that, Jupiter's that giver of gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So gifting is my love language. And I really, really, really love someone or really, really dig them. Making gift packages is like my joy.
Oh,
Why?
I love that. And then I don't know if you've heard of Mystic Michaela and her like aura stuff.
Mystic Michaela, I don't know. That name sounds a little familiar to me, but I have not run into her stuff yet.
Yeah, so she her stuff is really fun. She's a psychic medium and aura reader, so she can see with her third eye the color of like people's primary colors in their auric fields, which
Cool.
really feels like it's tied to the chakras. So maybe some of their
Oh,
like prominent chakra energy.
yeah.
So if I was going to guess your aura just from like the interactions we've had, she does say that nurses tend to be a combination of the yellow and blue colors. Blues are the empath colors.
Yeah.
And yellow is, even again, if you think of like the solar plexus chakra, like there's a lot of like process that they like and a lot of order and to kind of scaffold things and
Yeah.
get all the details together. And I don't mind the busy work, like it's
Right.
yeah. So you could be a yellow blue
Ooh.
combination, which could be cool. But I wonder too, she sees sometimes rainbow or crystal auras on people who have really still strong connections to like what you could call starseed origins or to like non-earth experiences, right? I wonder if you might have a little bit of like a rainbow or crystal aura because you give off a little bit of that vibe.
It's a funny thing because there's one thing I don't talk much about. It's galactic and star seeds. It's just not a thing I talk about. I think there's a part of my higher self that says, we're going to play a game with you and you're pretend you don't know anything about that. You
We're
be
gonna
cool with that?
pretend.
And I'm like, okay, I'll be cool with that. But then it's so strange because I'll find myself gravitating towards certain crystals, and one of those crystals that I've gravitated to, but I also am a little reticent about bringing into my life is moldavite. And moldavite, when I first discovered moldavite, I was told by this person who worked at this crystal shop, she was like, oh, it's a really strong crystal. It helps you access your higher gifts, makes you a little spacey. Oh, and it's also like an APB for ETs. I was like, don't want this. You can have this back. But it's so strange because I'll just find myself being drawn to it at different crystal stores in different cities wherever I go. And so, I think there's that galactic part of me that's like, you just love thinking you don't know this. And I'm like, yeah, you don't want to know.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
I've had stuff happen, Bre, that have been very ET-like. And then as soon as it happens, there's a part of me that's like, no, 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 no. We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want that. Do we? No, we don't want that. We don't want that. So it's like I go back and forth. This is the Gemini, the double Gemini playing with itself in its head, right? So
100%. Being of both minds, being of dual mind.
right, right.
Oh, how fun. Well, thank you so much for telling us about those things. I know that you spoke a little bit about your path to becoming an Akashic Records reader and now a guide and teacher. Whatever else you'd like to share with us about, what you do in your business. I also really like in this part to talk with my podcast hosts and fellow business owners about why this work feels really important to you, why it's connected to your heart, like it's what feels like it's purpose. I think that's really fascinating for me to hear from people about. So I'll give the floor to you.
Well, honestly, I resisted this work. I was so fascinated and drawn to it. And as soon as I got the knowledge, I started to run from it. And what I've noticed in my life is when something happens and a part of me immediately wants to run the opposite direction, it's because it's so big and good that I'm afraid that that I can't do it.
Mhm.
Even though I could do it, a part of me was almost like, this is too good to be true. So when I really got drawn into the work of the Akashic Records because I wanted to heal. I was coming from a relationship. I was married and it was so hard. I was like, why is this so freaking hard? And it wasn't until I got an Akashic record reading where she broke down to me not only the past life agreements, why this was a soul contract that would never work, all the different contracts we did have, and how our agreement was really to come together to bring this child into the world. And this is an agreement that's happened multiple times in multiple lives. That's when something in me, and I was about 30 years old, that was when something in me realized there's something much deeper to why we come to earth than just I come, I'm born, I live, I die. Like that was when I realized, okay, we're given an opportunity to come down, make these soul decisions, and it starts to influence a bigger story, a bigger theme, a bigger picture. What is that bigger picture? And that's when I realized it was really our soul's journey and how we gain sentience and how we evolve. And for some souls, a lot of it is mastery into higher levels of consciousness. For many souls on earth, they might be coming here to train to become angels, or they're coming here to train to become masters, or they're coming here to be teachers so that when they're done with this incarnation, they can go elsewhere and apply what they've learned to those different dimensional planes, galaxies, planets, or lifetimes. And when I realized how powerful the Akashic records were, it put the blinders over my eyes. And what the record keepers said to me was, we don't want you consuming all these other channels. Sure, if you're going to read channeling books and, manifesting, working with the guides, great. But we actually want you to limit how much you take in from other channels, whether it's Esther Hicks, Paul Selig, Cryon, all these different channels that exist, because we want you to understand that you have a unique delivery that's coming from the record keepers just for you, to the people that you're here to serve. And when I first started out my business, it was so interesting because I was like, please, God, please, record keepers, just send me 5 clients per month. I'd be so happy with 5 clients a month. And they would come, but I noticed this game that I would play with myself. Like, I didn't really feel like I was serious in doing the business. I was serious in doing readings, but I wasn't serious in doing the business. So for a few years, the business part kind of just struggled and slogged along. And I didn't do any marketing. People would pass on my information to others, and then eventually we'd do a reading. And I'd find myself doing like 1 or 2 readings a month. 1 or 2 readings in a month is not enough to sustain you as a business owner. And I was also doing readings in my bedroom, on my bed. How do you make a business happen if you're in the same location that you sleep in? Like, I didn't get it for many years. I was just like, this is just what I do on the side. So I really acted like this is what I do on the side. But I also was finding myself getting really burnt out with nursing. And instead of just focusing on this business, I started like 3 or 4 other businesses. But no matter what, I would burn out on those businesses, and still I would get that monthly email or twice a month email. Hey, I want to set up a session. Let's do some work. And it wasn't until about 2014 when I started dating my husband now. And I attracted a partner who believed in my work. And I've never given my partner, John, my husband, John, a reading at all. But he believed in my work. And I was like, wait a minute, you don't think this is kooky? He was like, I think it's kooky as fuck. But I don't think you're kooky. So I believe in you. I was like, oh, wow, I've never had a partner believe in me like this. And it's so strange that somebody else believing in you would actually be what makes the thing happen. Like, my clients believed in me. They would keep signing up to work with me, but somehow that wasn't the trigger. And that trigger, having my partner believe in me, was more than me believing in myself. And it just started to turn the wheel. And next thing I knew, I went from 1 to 2 sessions a month to 1 to 2 sessions a week. Then it became 3 sessions a week, then 5 sessions a week. Next thing I knew, I was literally booked with 10 to 12 clients a week. And that's when I realized actually the hospital can't afford me any longer. No amount of gift cards, Starbucks cards, lunch meals, nothing was going to take over the realization that this is really what I wanted to do full time. And so when I left, it was such a gratifying experience to have clients there already. And one of the things, and I think you'll appreciate this, Bre, being Virgo, is very systems based. I love systems. I love lists. I love things that automate and make my life easier. So I realized that it wasn't really about the gift, the trade that was needing work. It was about being a business owner. How do you run a business? And I just really focused on being as good of a business owner as I could, serving my clients and letting that be my main focus. And before long, that's when the training programs started. And what I find is that I wait for the record keepers to give me the information before I create. So for years, the record keepers kept telling me, there is the next training program after becoming an Akashic Records guide. And I was like, great, I don't really know what that looks like. And they said, well, we'll tell you when the time is right. They told me this year, the time is right. Here's the whole program. So this was the very first time that they dropped an entire program that was already created in the Akashic Records. I just had to teach it week by week and receive from them how to actually teach this program, which blew my mind because I wasn't creating something from scratch. I was creating something that was already done in the Akashic Records. I was just literally downloading the weekly lessons that they were showing me from this complete thing. So that's been the main gift, honestly, Bre, that the record keepers have shown me what I've completed and what I'm here to bring into creation as part of my impact, my legacy, my contribution. And through that, I've written books, I've written music, I've channeled articles, I've created programs and courses. And that's what makes the Akashic Records, in my humble opinion, one of the most fantastic bodies of work we can possibly access on Earth while we're here. Because it cuts down the amount of worry and fear around what am I supposed to do with my life and how do I do it? It's really about, can you receive it and can you step aside to execute it? So that's where I'm at. And in the last year, that's when I've started really creating more coaching programs to help people architect and design their lives, because I realize how short our time here on Earth is. We spend a great portion of our lives searching and looking for it. And then once we find it, we spend a lot of time in conflict while we're in it. And then we have the later years of our life where we're supposed to enjoy the fruits of our labor, right? And I just really see that this type of work helps you to be present with where you're at in the moment as you're creating your life, so that when you're reaching the later years of your life, there's no regret. There's no, if only I could have. If only I should have. It's like you're executing it and staying in action with it because you're in constant communication with your guides. So that's been the magic of the blessings of the Akashic Records. And I see that there's a certain amount of stuff I'm here to create. And from that point, we reach what we call the ceiling. And that's just what we end up teaching and training others for. Because it's really funny when I show up on a platform like TikTok, and I look at the analytics and I'm like, oh my gosh, most of the people that are watching this are like 18 to 30 years old. Is this really my audience? And then I hear in the background, this is the future. These are the future channels. These are the future readers. They need to be able to see mentors and spiritual teachers like you because they need someone that's strong to follow so that they can have the confidence and skills to do their sacred work on Earth. So it makes me realize, okay, we have this gift of social media in this time frame, which I consider the modern renaissance for us as teachers, healers, readers, light workers, to be able to spread our message out into the world. Because with the element of AI also, which I love AI, but I also feel like there's a lot of people that don't understand its process in our future. But for the people that are here who are the teachers, the readers, the leaders, the channels, it's our time to rise, to leave the information for the future to be able to build themselves up too.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
I hope I didn't digress.
Honestly, I love a digress moment because I feel like sometimes that's how things get injected in,
Yeah.
So I think it's all good. Um,
Awesome.
I'm kind of getting the feeling to go straight into our like major topic for the episode, which of course is the Akashic Records 101.
Yeah.
Um, and I really, the format that I have is kind of a Q&A format for us.
Good.
I like was tapping into some questions. I like was asking my guides and all that kind of stuff. Okay, what
Mhm.
questions would really support people to understand just even the basics, right? To be able to feel like there's enough familiarity with the concept of the Akashic records that their own intuition can lead them to however they're supposed to be working with it. So I have a list of questions for us. So if it sounds good to you, I think that
Let's
we'll
go.
probably just go straight into that.
Let's do it.
For today, we're going straight into our channel topic. Uh, we have the magnificent honor of having Anne here to be able to dive into this topic of the Akashic Records. The format today is going to be a Q&A. So we have a lot of questions here that are going to help us understand the basics of what the Akashic Records are, how we might work with them. I do have some questions here for Anne and I to give some examples of how that happens, just so there can be a little bit of context.
Yeah.
For people to understand, and I'm so excited to get into it.
Awesome.
Okay, so the first question, which is probably the most obvious one, is what are the Akashic Records? Um, I have my own answer to this. That's like a
Yeah.
very concise, simple answer that I want to share just because I really had no idea about any of this up until a couple years ago. And then I
Mhm.
would love for you, Anne, to go into whatever you want to add or whatever else is coming up for you about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my like, you don't know anything, like answer to what is the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records is a vibration or frequency of energy, a place, you could say, because you're accessing a certain vibration and frequency, right? And in this band of energy, in this frequency of energy, is stored the information of everything ever. Like from everything that's happened, every soul, it is the accumulated record of everything that's happening through this moment, as well as being able to sense the future potentials, because in our own consciousness, we're constantly like funding and engaging with the potential futures. And so it captures those things too. Um, yes, so that would be my like very simple explanation of the Akashic Records. The only other things I would add is from what I've learned about it, this exists in the 11th dimension. We're here in the third dimensional world with things we can see and touch. Our own consciousness can access fourth and fifth dimensional, like ways of being aware and in the world. Working to be in that fifth dimensional energy is usually a lot of that like spiritual awakening journey and growth or whatever. And of course, we can come into contact with other dimensions and access information, which is part of what we're doing with the Akashic Records. But that particular group of energy and information, 11th dimension Akashic Records. They call it the Book of Life, other associations with it. So that would be my very simple answer, like what is the records?
Yeah. Love
What do you
it.
think, Anne?
I think that's a great definition for it. What I tell people when they ask me what are the Akashic records is I try to bring it to where we're at right now in the world. And I tell them, think of the Akashic records like the universe's supercomputer. And the supercomputer belongs to Source. And Source is having all of these soul experiences all over the world through all these different years. So it needs a way to be able to catalog the information, hold it, to be able to run the programs of the computer, and then to also provide what we see some guidance. And so when we access the universal supercomputer, we access our file. Our file holds not only our present life circumstances, but all of our past life agreements, contracts, experiences, and the future potentials. And so when we access our files, it helps to give us the ability to see the big picture of our life, what we can affect on our timeline, who are the people that we're here to work with. And so when we're accessing this supercomputer, it allows us to be able to know how to change the programs so that our personal operating system is running at its peak capacity, when it comes to our health, our wealth, our relationships, and our choices. And the other way I describe this, the Akashic Records, is it's essentially a storehouse that holds all of sources in acquired information through all its emissaries in the form of human beings, animals, other dimensional beings. It holds that information in a database that we can access in the storehouse, or like a library. It holds that information in certain books. And so when we access the storehouse and we get these books, it helps us to be able to know who we are, what we're here to do, and what we're here to affect. I totally agree with you about the third, fourth, fifth dimensional layers that we're capturing here as souls on Earth, because there's a lot of people who get a little fixed, they get transfixed on, well, what am I supposed to do with these other dimensional lives and dimensional times, and how do I get to the fifth dimension? And it's sort of like, I find that when people are thinking that way, they're either avoiding what's in front of them in the moment, or they're trying to cut the line. Like they want to skip where they're at in line and move forward and try to get into a dimensional level, layer, or aspect where they may not be consciously ready for. So I find that, the records not only holds what we're here to do, but also holds what we can influence, affect, and create.
Love that. I love that.
That great.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the only other thing that I'll add is, there's also an analogy of being a library, right? A big library of information, of course. And yes, when you get an Akashic Records reading done, or when you connect with the records, really what you're connecting with is your own personal records, like Anne said, your own file. So
Right.
you're connecting, and I guess we can talk about this part too. In my understanding of it, when you connect with the Akashic Records, it's not necessarily that like you are plopped into that frequency and like you're in the middle of all the records of everything. It's more that you are able to like call it up and be able to say, hey, records, can I talk to somebody who tells me all the things I need to know about me? And they say, yeah, sure. And they put you on the phone with your Akashic Records guides or Akashic Records keepers, and you talk to the keepers. And this connection, even via the phone, is incredibly activating and healing, and it can have a profound impact on your physical current self, but you're also getting the benefit of the information that you're getting from your personal record keepers whenever you're personally connecting with your records, or you're having a guide connect with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about that, Bre, is that it also depends on where you're at in the timeline when you're connecting with the record keepers to find out information. Because I've had clients where they'll ask, well, who is this person I'm here to connect with? And we're connecting with their current file for that current time. And if the record keepers don't show when another person or circumstance crosses their lives at a certain time, in that moment, when they open the records, that information might not be there. But let's say 2 weeks later, this same person continues to live their life, continues to make their decision, continues to listen to the guidance, and now they find themselves in new areas, new communities, new connections. And then you open their Akashic Records, they ask the same exact question: who am I to work with to be able to experience this growth in my world? And now you're getting that information. That's the part that's always made me be like, how is it that it's not available now, but it might be available later? What's the difference there? Part of it is timing of when you access the records. The other part is who connects to your timeline when that time is relevant for your question to be answered. Sometimes that shows up, or it gives us the real awareness that, we can only focus on our personal records. And the reason why I bring this up is that when we had a changeover in our presidency recently between Trump and Biden, Biden was already sworn into office. And I had a client ask, well, when is Trump going to be reinstated? And the record keepers are like, we don't see this happening in this current timeline. And this person was really, really upset because according to their guides, this was going to happen. But the world's timeline and what was happening was very different from what this person was thinking was going to happen. So that it's a very interesting thing, because what you may want and what shows up in your records or your timeline may be two very different things.
Well, this leads me to one of the questions that I had written down, which is talking about the difference between getting an Akashic Records reading, like from a guide, and getting a psychic reading. I just
Ah,
recently read a book,
yeah,
Opening the Akashic Records by Maureen St. Germain. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. I
I
love her work.
am.
And and she talks a lot about distinctly like the Akashic Records readings are not psychic readings.
Right.
Um, and it was interesting because sometimes I had found myself just saying that the experience of it can be similar for somebody who's never had a channeled like session before, that the way that it runs is similar. But I think
Mhm.
my understanding of what she was saying is that psychic readings have a little bit more of a predictive element, where that's not necessarily been my experience or what I've read about the Akashic Records. It
Yes.
can have, again, elements of like your potential futures, or if you have things
Right.
that you've contracted again for that, like your soul's mission, like I'm getting this done in this life, those kinds of things about the future can be accessed in a certain way. But the Akashic Records readings are not meant to like capture all of these things ahead of you and like toss them over to you and tell you what's like, no, that's been my experience. But I would love for you to speak too about how you would distinguish an
Right.
Akashic Records channeling session versus some sort of psychic reading.
Right. And I love that you bring this up. And this is the reason why when I go through the training program, Become an Akashic Records Guide, we don't jump right into the Akashic Records right away. As a matter of fact, we first start out with your intuition and channeling in the Akashic field. So we're surrounded by the Akashic field all the time. This is a field of energy that's constantly recording the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual layer of all of our thoughts, actions, potential actions. The field of itself is what I feel like many psychics access, the Akashic field.
Interesting.
Within the Akashic field is this frequency band that you spoke about called the Akashic Records. So when you're accessing the Akashic Records, you actually have to do something to get into the Akashic Records. For some people, it's stating a prayer. For other people, there's a ritual. For other people, it's a method. For a lot of psychics, they're naturally intuitive and naturally tuned in. So when they're accessing information, whether it's information that's now or predictive in nature, they're accessing the field of the person. Sometimes they'll say, I feel like I access the Akashic Records. And the reason why you feel like you access the Akashic Records is you're in the field of the Akasha, which is surrounding everything and everyone, right?
Yeah.
So of course you feel like you're in the field. But what I've noticed is the difference between channeling and reading from the Akashic Records. And this is the reason why I teach it in this strategic step-by-step format, is that when you learn how to actually really use your intuition and how to channel, you'll just naturally receive stuff. But the nature of what you receive versus when you're in the Akashic Records, it's like night and day. When the record keepers deliver, it has a different feeling to it. It has a vibration to it. It affects your body a certain way. And it's as if it doesn't always stream so smoothly as it does in channeled readings. What I find is within myself, as well as many readers that I've also observed, is sometimes they're delivering the information in little bits and pieces, phrases as they're going through, because they're literally receiving it in the moment as it's appearing. Now, I will share that when you're working with the timeline, sometimes the record keepers will show you the entire timeline. And based on a person's question, they'll see something occurring within the timeline that they can tell then a person, we see this thing occurring within your timeline. Many times I've gotten emails from clients that have said, hey, the record keepers said this thing was going to happen and it happened. And that's because they were really aligned to this outcome already, that when they received it in the reading, the record keepers were in a way kind of guiding, leading them to this outcome because this was something their soul really agreed to. predictive things, psychic predictions, there's what I call a little bit of a 50% chance of it coming versus it not happening. And the reason why is every single decision that we make as choices, as souls, always influences what shows up.
Mm-hmm. And that
And
doesn't even take into account other people's choices or other, because like everything's always overlapping. All it takes is one little ripple to change and somebody across the world to come and impact you in a certain way that you respond different. And all of a sudden you're on another path. So like all of these things are so, so changeable.
exactly. And that's the reason why I think one of the most dangerous questions people ask, especially when it comes to something like love and partnership, is who is this person I'm going to meet? Where are we going to meet them? How are they going to look? What are they going to wear? And it's like you're asking something today that might take months or maybe even years or many, many days to appear. But you're only asking from your side of the story. So if they were to tell you, well, this person's going to be wearing a red shirt, blue pants, they're going to have this color of hair, this is what they're going to be looking like, they're telling you from that moment. But when that circumstance actually occurred and you are in the same scenario with this person, you're looking for somebody with red shirt, blue pants, and that same person could have shown up in the same place with you, but instead of a red shirt, blue pants, they wore a white shirt and black pants. You wouldn't even see them because your mind is locked into this particular characteristic that you received days, months, years ago. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why, in terms of predictions, the record keepers are a little bit loose on really anchoring things down because they know how changeable human beings are.
Yeah, I love that. One of the questions that came through is, why might somebody work with the records? Why might they feel called towards it? Like what is that comes up? Oh, is this something you want me to talk about, or you want to let Anne go first? Okay, they're saying either one. I feel like
example of you working with the record keepers during a live podcast. You have your records open to gain the guidance from the record keepers to say, this is what they want to talk about next. I'm literally watching you doing this. And I think that's so freaking phenomenal because you're letting them kind of go with the flow of how you want this to go out into the world for people to be able to receive. So kudos to you, Queen. I think that you're doing phenomenal.
What's funny is a lot of times I end up cutting some of that out of the episode and I'll leave it in this one where like in the episode, I literally stop and I say, okay, what do you want me to talk about next? How do you want me to say that again?
Yeah.
Like, okay. And I get it. And then I say it and I just cut out that part for the sake of time. I'll leave it in this one, but like, that's how I work. And even in sessions, like I'm never looking at the camera. I'm looking off to the side. I'm like, will you show that to me again? Like, oh, what was that? Like, it's just like this constant conversation that's really fun.
Love it. Love it.
Okay, so why might somebody want to work with the Akashic Records? My feeling and experience with the Akashic Records is that it's such a high vibrational source of energy that it's really only going to resonate and align with you and I think attract you in the first place if you are really, really aligned with soul growth, like being like aligned in a spiritual way. I feel like some people might want to get psychic readings or even like other kind of readings where they're connecting with spirit. And they're still kind of thinking in three-dimensional paradigms and they're still really motivated by that. And I don't mean that as a judgment, just as an observation. And I find that people that feel attracted to the Akashic Records and get the most out of the readings are people who are open to and engaging in that soul level growth and wanting to live out a path and an experience in their life that's aligned in that way. Because the information that's going to come through there, like it's not going to be something that serves your human ego. It's not going to be something that plays by the rules of like the three-dimensional world. Like that's not what it's catering to. This kind of information is catering to like what before you came into this life, like what your soul determined was important in this moment, how you can feel most aligned and lit up and in the spirit of love and compassion and wisdom. Like that is its own frequency and it's and kind of like what it cares about to an extent, I guess. It's I don't know that it's sentient quite like that, but it just to describe the kinds of things that come up in that way. So I feel like if you are curious about when working with the Akashic Records versus doing other kinds of sessions and healing might work for you, if you want insight about like what is connected to you on a soul level and trying to process your experiences and growth and determine a like aligned action from that place, and you
Yeah.
want it in the spirit of compassion and wisdom, like the Akashic Records are for you. Not to mention, and this is something that's been really cool to see, especially recently, is that there is something about coming to meet the Akashic Records that is incredibly activating. If
Yes.
you have shown up for your spiritual growth journey and
Yeah.
you get an Akashic Records reading, like your life will change. You will start to feel, oh, like the sense of things, growth will start. It's almost like a domino falls because
Yeah.
getting in contact with that energy, it like lights something up, it like turns on a switch, it does some major kind of activation. So even just by virtue of you connecting with your records, regardless of the information that comes through, I find it to be incredibly healing and incredibly activating. This is crazy. I'm like getting super hot as I'm saying this. This feels like a confirmation that this is like really
Oh, yeah.
true and this feels
We're like,
important to say.
here now.
Yes. I'm
Keep
like,
going.
why did I
Keep
wear a
going.
sweater today? So that's kind of my 2 cents about, how it might be different or why you might feel called to work with it. But Anne, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, you encapsulated that so, so well. And one of the things that you brought up was, I'm not sure if they're sentient. And I totally believe the Akashic records are sentient because they belong to source. So it's like
Mm,
super sentience. And why someone would really want to work with the Akashic records, there's 3 reasons. And I actually had to write this question down because I could sense the record keepers wanted to deliver something. And there were 3 things that they shared. And the first really is clarity. As a soul, I've found that the Akashic records are so helpful in giving me guidance on what to do next. And from that clarity, now I can receive directions and then I can initiate action. It also helps is what helps to work with Akashic records is when you're ready to heal and also to let go of some of the weight of the baggages that you're carrying as a soul. Once you recognize, oh my God, I really signed up for that, no matter how good or bad that is, and you give yourself permission to address it, it literally peels off those layers off of you as this being of light and allows you to realize, wow, this earth plane is a really magnificent plane. And I can do so much and I can affect so many, and I can also heal. You heal when you hear. Yeah, the work is really tough sometimes, but getting past the work and getting into a state of joy, peacefulness, contentment, that's really the third reason why I feel like someone would want to work with the record keepers, is because they want to really empower themselves and maximize the decisions they make so they're not in a place of conflict. We talked about different dimensions, and we here on earth get to experience third, fourth, and fifth. The highest level that we can experience life on earth, especially with the record keepers, is to be in a total state of union with our higher self. And so when you work with the Akashic records, it gives you the steps to be in union with your soul, so you're less in conflict because you're in a polarized state of earth, this dense state. And I honestly feel like that contributes not only to the sentience of the Akashic records, it contributes to soul sentience. Soul sentience, oh my gosh, our souls are so wise and so full of love that we on earth fight ourselves to just be in a state of peace and acceptance. And what I often tell clients, and what I've often heard from the record keepers, is all kinds of things can happen to the physical body here on earth, but the light self, the light body, is always pure. It's untainted. And when I hear that and I recognize that, there is a part of me that steps into the light to just be in a state of joy, because our world needs that from us as light workers, right? So
mm.
that's why I would want to work with the record keepers.
Even as you said that, our light body, stays pure. Like I felt that like ripple out of my heart space. Like that was such a beautiful feeling. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Um,
Absolutely.
and what was that you were showing me? That you wanted me to say? Yeah. So, of my first podcast that I did was a big download about the healing process, which is really like a spiritual awakening and, the things that come after that. And
Yeah.
my perspective on it, which I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to have a question that is about how each channel's perspective kind of colors and influences how they do their work and, all that
So,
kind of stuff. We're going to get to that in a minute. But for me, what feels, important to me and why I do this work is because I feel like learning how to heal our body and to some extent our three-dimensional self, like understanding our trauma, doing trauma healing, doing shadow work, all of that is so important because of connecting with our most authentic self, which I really feel like is our soul, our light body, like you were talking about. I feel like our purpose here is to come into contact with that self again, to be like
yeah.
in full contact and be able to act from that place. And ultimately, in order to do that, is all of these healing processes. It's understanding the patterns and conditioning and taking them off like shackles so that not only can we sense and receive and be in union with that soul, most authentic self. There's a lot of interchangeable words. That's not really the most important part of what you call it, but coming into contact with
Yeah.
that part of yourself and being able to freely express, because that's not only how you evolve as an individual soul, but because we're so connected, that's also how you help the collective and you help the earth. And that doesn't even take into account like what those actions themselves do. Do you know what I mean? So I explain all of that to say I feel so grateful that I stumbled upon the Akashic Records. And one of the questions I got when I did a Q&A was how did we come to the records? And you explain the answer to this question, and I'll take this moment to explain mine.
Yeah.
I was working with a very powerful channel and energy healer, Scarlett Curtis. Heal with
Yeah.
Scarlett on Instagram. I'll put her information in the show description. And in a reading with her, my guides and who she was channeling mentioned you've worked with the Akashic Records before, and we'd really love for you to work with us again.
Mm.
Here's a teacher that you can consider, and they named you. And
Oh,
I
wow.
remember right after that, I followed you, and I knew that I was going to do your Become an Akashic Records guy course at some point, but it was just a matter of timing. And even the experience of coming into the decision to do it and the timing was a really cool one, a story for another day. But I feel really grateful that I came to the Akashic Records because I feel like I always knew that I was going to be doing some sort of channeling work, some sort of healing work.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what the Akashic Records were before that session when Scarlett said it. I had to literally go look it up and like read about it. I think
Yeah.
soon after that is actually when I booked a session with you so I could experience it like firsthand and understand what it was. And I feel like working with the Akashic Records aligns so much with how I understand healing, about what about it feels important, because like we just said, the whole purpose of the Akashic Records is to support your soul growth. It's to help give you clarity. It's to help give you wisdom. I find it gives a lot of closure because you're getting this other perspective that's based in love and compassion so that you can connect with your own soul. You can feel more empowered in your own connection with source and your higher knowing to be able to navigate this world in a way that feels so yummy and good, you know? And the Akashic Records is by far what feels like the most effective way to be able to access the kind of information that lets you do that. And it's so I feel like it's so almost like focused on just doing that
Yeah.
that like there's nothing else that's going to go on other than things that support that in the records. And I feel really grateful that that's how I learned to channel. That was really my first experience really channeling through,
Yeah.
because I feel like there's a lot of other things, and I don't mean this as a judgment, again, just as an observation. There's so many different kinds of energies that you can sense and channel into, and places where you can get information. And some of those can be very supportive. But
Yes.
I feel like the Akashic Records is such I guess in a sense, a trustworthy place, and understanding its mission and its purpose
Yeah.
makes me feel very, I guess, confident or very like at peace, very aligned
Yeah,
with working with the records and helping to support the people and the souls that I work with.
right. Well, and it's not human created. Everything that else that we experience and get to learn on earth, whether it's human design or it's like the Myers-Briggs or it's Clifton strengths, all of these different things are human created. And all of these different things, believe it or not, are channeled from the Akashic Records because the record keepers hold all the database of every single thing. That's what makes working the Akashic Records so fantastic. We're accessing the database of source, not human created. Now, what is human created are the ways in which we can access it, right? But that's what our third dimensional human self needs to know, because our fifth dimensional light body self is like, well, okay, you do this work, you say whatever you need to, because we're already connected. We need you to feel like you're connected so we can now transmit things through you to you in a way where you can trust.
I just
And
need you to allow it.
you just need to allow it. And that's the reason why I think that, I agree with you. The Akashic Records is such a powerful body because we are not affecting how the Akashic Records are actually managed, monitored, created, functions. And human beings have a natural meddlesome tendencies. So even in some of the teachers that I've worked with and people I've received readings from, there's always this caution of, there are some people who may have gone in there and meddled with the records. And I'm like, if we're thinking that, we're making the Akashic Records a human construct. You think we can affect sources programs, which are created in divine codes and geometries? Like, that's very egotistical for us to think that way. And yet there are people who will manipulate things for their own benefits or desires or agendas. And that is you just got to be really mindful when you're going out there to work with spirit workers. What's their agenda? That's really the question. What's your agenda? And if your agenda is to help and to support, then you are coming from the highest possible vibration, working with whether it's the Akashic Records or any field of creation, then you're coming really from the highest position of light.
Well, this is a perfect lead up to another question we had, which is about how can we find, if we want a guide, we want somebody that's going to help channel the Akashic Records for us. If maybe we have worked on channeling our own Akashic Records or we have not, but for whatever reason, we want to work with a guide about finding a reader, Akashic Records channeler. And I guess an extension of some of these tips will apply to if there are other types of healers or channelers that you want to work with. I think at least some of what I plan to say could probably be applied across the board. I'll just say, hold on, let me tap into this. What would you like me to say about this question about finding the right guide? Yeah. So what I'm getting is that you really, really, really have to trust your heart. You have to trust your intuition about the people you got to work with. That the right people are going to be brought into your fields. They're going to be brought into your path. And again, this is what brings me back to that healing work. The healing work is being able to understand when your conditioning and when your ego mind is stepping in to protect you and to keep you safe, and sort of making the messages from your intuition either totally cut off, you can't hear them, or making them a little foggy or distorting them. So doing your healing work so that you can receive your own intuitive knowings in like a really clear and powerful way is the precursor to all of the wonderful things that you want in your life, including being intuitively led with your decisions. But letting your intuition tell you who is trustworthy, who has good intentions, and even aside from that, who's aligned with you. Like I find myself following, people on Instagram or whatever who are light workers, and I can acknowledge that they're doing great work, but like for whatever reason at this moment in time, it doesn't feel aligned for me to like go do a session with them, and it's not because I don't think they're trustworthy or that they don't have good intentions, but it's just vibrationally not like for me at that point in time. So acknowledging the elements of that. And the other thing too is like when you find yourself continuing to think about a certain healer, or imagining yourself doing a session with them, or like they keep popping up into your mind, I know that's a signal for me that like my guides are like, come on, let's go, like like book the session with them. So I find that to be another signal that
Like,
that the option of working with them could be incredibly helpful to the things that you're asking them for. Like when you're asking for help and you're setting the intention to heal, like they're bringing things into your path to help you do that. And one of those things that they might be bringing in is particular healers or light workers to help support you or activate you. So that's a little bit of my 2 cents about finding the right guide or person to work with. And what do you think about it?
well, I definitely agree with you, Bre. I mean, I still get readings. I probably get about 2 to 3 Akashic record readings a year, but I'm not following a bunch of readers. If anything, when the time is right, I get a message from my guides, work with her, and then what I find, or work with him, and then what I find is I go into action immediately with that. I don't sit around going, well, should I, shouldn't I? And when I get that clear, this is somebody you need to talk to, I just take action right away. I did create this special group of, it's a resource, especially for people who've gone through Become an Akashic Records guide. These are people that I'm actually witnessing how they read. I'm giving you feedback on how you read, and I'm promoting your work as a reader because I believe in you. And so for many of the practitioners who've gone through Become an Akashic Records guide, I offer them this service called to be able to be listed as an Akashic Records reader on akashicrecordsguide.com. And when you look at akashicrecordsguide.com, you can see who are those readers that have gone through the training programs that I've worked with or I've created, because I actually can vet every single one of these readers. I know how they read. I know how they deliver. When it comes to, finding an Akashic Records reader that resonates with you, I'll let you know right now, there are so many different ways you can find readers, from Etsy to social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they're all over. What I also find is paying attention to their content. Are they regularly posting, talking about the Akashic Records, how to work with the Akashic Records? That will actually start to show who are the influencers, the leaders, the teachers, versus those that are just coming off a little bit and then they disappear. So you really want to look for consistency. You want to make sure that there's testimonials that are available that can prop up that reader. You also want to see, how long has this reader been in practice? So you had brought up that book, How to Read the Akashic Records by Maureen St. Germain. Maureen St. Germain came to Austin for a workshop, and one of my best friends told me about it. Didn't even think twice. Signed up for the workshop, found out she was doing readings, signed up to do readings. The immediacy of how you take action is actually a good insight for you that it's being divinely guided, if not guided by your record keepers, to come and have a conversation with them. And I'm not negating other readers, because I also get readings. I've gotten tarot readings, psychic readings, channeled readings, mediumship readings. The most recent Akashic Records reading that I received was from a woman who did what I call a mashup. She was doing an Akashic Records reading, she was doing a light language, she was also doing coaching, and she was also doing other. So within the reading itself was like 4 or 5 things that were happening. That's totally fine. I wanted to experience this person's work to see how they work. That's the reason why I primarily get readings, is because I want to see how other people read, because it's really helpful for me as a teacher on how and what to teach. Plus, I love getting readings. Okay.
I think that there's a certain element too, like your own intuition is your best guide, 100%. Trust that over anything. Doesn't matter what anybody else says. If your intuition tells you different, like it doesn't matter who, literally it doesn't matter who it's from, but trust yourself.
Mhm.
But I will say that sometimes there's an element about letting somebody else bring in information for you that can help bring
Yeah.
through things that are difficult for you to
Yeah.
maybe get in that same clarity. So I think the function of letting other people help you can be beautiful.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, the other things on this before we move on to the other questions, it feels like I also felt called to mention some watch outs. I want to empower everybody to feel really safe and feel really trusting in coming into spaces where you're working with spirit. Um, I found that a common thread between healers and light workers uh, that are at the very least rooted in a really grounded and centered place is that they understand that it's not them and their own ego that's the
Yeah.
master of this and that's giving you things, that it's spirit, that they're a channel, that they're a conduit. There's that sort of like humbleness that it's not really about them as
Yep.
much as it is about this higher power. And also that you have access to that same higher power. There should also be this element of empowering you,
Yeah.
and there should never be this orientation of some sort of like light worker healer, like you have to go to them to be able to access this, or like that they're the higher or better than you. Yes, there is an element of like, if you want to be able to access the gifts that they've cultivated, like you're going to spend a lot less time less time working with them than you trying to master those things, right? So of course there's value that they can bring that
Yeah.
maybe you haven't accumulated just yet, but there's never, I've found with the ones that really resonate, it's not that like they think they are the end all be all as much as they're offering their gift
Yeah.
from this higher power, from this source. Um, and you can look up to like even research like red flags with scammers. Like if people in sessions are not honoring time boundaries in a like really extreme
Mhm.
way, that can be an indication that something not great is going on. If they're
Mhm.
trying to upsell you on things during sessions, or they're trying to create a sense of urgency and they're telling you
Yes.
like really scary things about the
Yeah.
future, about things about yourself in the field that requires you to buy something. Like these are all like major no-nos. That is not
Yes.
somebody that's like oriented in light. I'll say even the times when I have had something like maybe like an entity in my field or something going on, even in those moments, the healer should be still empowering you. And they should always understand too that like they could work with you again, or they might be guided to somebody else that uniquely helps them in a different way. Like there's always this openness and there's never this pressure that it has to be with me in any way. Like follow your own intuition, please. That's going to guide you the best. Like it should always feel like that, no matter who, no matter what discipline, like it should always be in that vein. So I just wanted to take a minute to share those things.
Oh, so critical there.